Hidden behind hedgerows, guarded by silence, and buried in royal footnotes, these are the mansions they don't put on the postcards. While Buckingham Palace steals the spotlight, the real stories unfold in places you've never seen. Secret retreats, scandal-scarred estates, forgotten castles where the monarchy hides, heals, or unravels. From Transylvanian forests to English parklands, each door leads somewhere stranger than fiction. Some are homes, some are traps, all are real. And they were never meant for public eyes. Welcome to 13 secret mansions hidden by the British royals you never knew, where power whispers louder than it speaks. Before we step behind the velvet curtain, make sure you're subscribed. It helps us keep digging into the stories they'd rather stay buried. And while you're here, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments and tell us what time it is. Midnight? Sunrise? We're curious who else is wandering the royal shadows with us. 1. Forest Lodge. If you walk through Windsor Great Park, the kind of place where joggers wear quarter zips embroidered with their children's boarding school crests, you'd never know you were brushing past one of the most discreet royal fortresses in the country. There's no sign, no flag, no trace of ceremony. Just red brick geometry tucked behind old oaks, silent gravel paths, and a lake that reflects nothing back. This is Forest Lodge, and it's not a castle, it's a compromise. In 2025, William and Catherine quietly inked a 20-year lease on the place. Market rate, no pomp. Just like normal people. Except normal people don't sign leases on houses hidden inside 5,000 acres of royal parkland, where pheasants outnumber tourists and the air smells of curated history. They moved in with the kids. No fanfare, no moving trucks spotted by tabloids, just a shift behind the hedgerow. Forest Lodge was never meant to be seen. That's the point. It's technically not secret. It's just absent. From postcards, from press releases, from palace tours. It's not listed among the royal residences, because it isn't one, not formally. And yet, this is the closest thing the future king has to a real home, not a castle to pose in, not a palace to inherit, just a heavily surveilled, fully restored Georgian house where they hope no one bothers them. The family pictures are on the walls, the toys are in the garden, the blinds are always drawn. People assume royalty lives in grandeur. But Forest Lodge whispers a different story. Of long leases instead of long reigns. Of living in the cracks between ceremonial roles. It's not the kind of place they show off. But it is, increasingly, the kind of place they choose. And if you follow the hedgerows a few counties east, and squint between the fences of Norfolk farmland, you'll find a similar pattern playing out, in a house that was less of a secret and more of a royal experiment in domestic camouflage. 2. Anmer Hall. On paper, Anmer Hall was a wedding present, a quaint gesture from a queen grandmother who knew that newlyweds need space, even when they're royals, or perhaps especially then. A 10-bedroom Georgian manor on the Sandringham estate, quietly handed to William and Catherine after their 2011 marriage. No public ribbon cutting, no guided tours, just keys. And silence. In practice, it became something else entirely. For years, this was their unofficial headquarters, not the glossy Kensington apartment, not the polished London offices, but this. A house buried in the Norfolk countryside, where helicopters came and went, like uninvited birds, and the press knew better than to ask for photos. It had a pool, tennis courts, wide lawns for young heirs to lose themselves on. It had no need for a throne. Anmer was where the royal couple attempted, with varying degrees of success, to play house. To raise children with the veneer of normalcy, to host friends who didn't leak to the tabloids, to live among muddy wellies instead of marble halls. It was also where they waited, for the spotlight to move, for the crown to edge closer, for privacy to become an illusion again. And still, Anmer remains. Less of a hideout now that Forest Lodge has taken over as the forever home, but no less significant. A kind of emotional safe house, a controlled wilderness where royal routines could be tested away from London eyes. No cameras, no gates open to the public. Just a house that isn't haunted, but might be remembered. But if Anmer was a place to raise children, then the next house was something stranger. A place to plant legacy. A manor whose grounds were landscaped not just with hedges and topiary, but with philosophy. Anmer Hall may be tucked behind Norfolk hedgerows, but you're already inside. At least, in spirit. If you're enjoying the quiet unraveling of these royal hideouts, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what comes next. And while you're here, where are you listening from? Is it late, early, somewhere in between? Drop your location and the time in the comments. Let's see who else is awake for secrets like these. 3. Highgrove House. To call Highgrove a royal residence is to miss the joke. It's not a palace. It's a manifesto disguised as a house. Purchased in 1980 by the Duchy of Cornwall for a 32-year-old Prince Charles, Highgrove was never about escaping royal duty. It was about redefining it, through compost. Here, in Gloucestershire's orderly wilderness, the man who would be king spent 4 decades planting trees with emotional backstories and talking to roses like they were diplomats. The gardens, open to the public only by appointment, and the house never at all, are no mere landscaping project. They are curated arguments against modernity, against convenience, against synthetic fertilizer. The house itself, late 18th century Georgian bones, heavy curtains, family photographs the public will never see, remains locked away. A private residence in every sense. Staff are vetted, visitors are filtered. Even the dogs seem to know discretion. This is not where Charles performed monarchy. This is where he practiced belief. In architecture, in agriculture, in tradition with a lowercase t. And now that he wears the crown, Highgrove sits at an awkward intersection. No longer the domain of a prince with a cause, but of a king with a calendar. The estate is still active, the garden still open, but the energy has shifted. It's no longer just a home. It's a fossilized version of an idea Charles used to have time for. One foot in duty, the other still stubbornly in the dirt. You can tour the gardens, yes. You can admire the lavender banks and the topiary riddles and pretend you understand what a ha-ha is. But the house? The house is out of reach. Always has been. Probably always will be. And north of here, tucked in the mist of the Scottish Highlands, there's another place that understands how to disappear. A royal love nest. A grief retreat. A house where echoes carry farther than press releases. 4. Birkhall. There are houses where people live, and then there are houses where people disappear. Birkhall has always leaned toward the latter. Technically, it's part of the Balmoral estate, that remote, myth-drenched sprawl of forest and fog in Aberdeenshire that has long served as the royal family's seasonal escape hatch. But Birkhall isn't the big house. It's the one down the drive, past the trees, behind the silence. And unlike the turreted postcard version of Balmoral Castle, Birkhall isn't open to the public. It's not even really visible. You can drive past it a dozen times and never know it's there. It started as a royal side property in the 19th century, purchased by Prince Albert as a gift for Queen Victoria, a backup retreat within their main retreat, which says a lot about how royalty handles privacy. Birkhall was later given to King George V, then to the Queen Mother, and eventually landed in the hands of Charles, back when he was still Prince of Wales. He didn't just use it. He made it mean something. Birkhall was where Charles went after Diana died, not to mourn publicly, but to fold inward, where he and Camilla retreated when the press got too loud, and when the public got too sharp. It's been called their marital home, but that phrase feels quaint. What Birkhall really became was a sort of emotional exile compound, a stone house with soft interiors and ironclad boundaries. Camilla has said it's where they're happiest. Friends say it's their favorite place on earth. Staff describe it in hushed tones. And yet, no formal tours. No official images beyond a few staged photos of dogs on rugs. When Charles became king, many wondered if he'd abandoned Birkhall for something grander. He didn't. It remained his Scottish refuge, understated, untouched, unspoken. There's something quietly unsettling about a place that has played host to both private sorrow and private joy in equal, unseen measure. Birkhall is where you live when you're not trying to be seen. It's the opposite of performative. The curtains are always drawn. The phone rarely rings. The walls do not talk. And when Charles wanted the same kind of detachment in Wales, somewhere to visit but never parade, he looked west, not north. What he found was smaller, scruffier, and maybe even more obscure. 5. Llwynywermod. If you're struggling to pronounce it, you're not alone. Llwynywermod doesn't just sound remote, it is remote. Nestled in the rolling countryside of Carmarthenshire, Wales, it's a 192-acre estate made of sheep pastures, crooked hedgerows, and the kind of silence that feels less like peace and more like insulation. The name means place of the alder grove, but you don't need to know Welsh to feel how deeply unroyal it seems. When Charles bought it in 2006, it raised eyebrows, not because he was hiding anything, but because no one expected a prince to pick a place with no palace-like features at all. There was no grand manor, no gilded trim, just a run-down cluster of farm buildings, one of which was converted into a modest 3-bedroom house. The others became holiday lets, because even royalty has to justify property expenses sometimes. This wasn't about display, it was about symbolic presence. Charles, then Prince of Wales, needed a base in Wales, somewhere to call home when visiting the country he was nominally linked to by title. But he didn't want to pretend. Llwynywermod was a compromise. Humble, deliberately traditional, and architecturally Welsh to the bone. Built with local stone, fitted with reclaimed timber, heated by biomass boilers, a little carbon-neutral kingdom. And yet, for all its earth-loving design and eco-purity, the place remained distant. Not in distance, but in access. No tourist lines, no open days. Visitors booked the cottages, not the main house. Locals might spot a Range Rover on the lanes, or a Camilla-shaped silhouette in the window. But mostly, it kept its head down. After Charles became king, he quietly chose not to renew the lease. Said he wouldn't have the time anymore. But that decision had the finality of retreat, not logistics. Llwynywermod wasn't just a Welsh base. It was a placeholder for a version of himself that no longer fit. Now it sits, empty but preserved. A time capsule of simpler royal PR strategies, eco-conscious, locally sourced, and completely opaque. But when Charles really wanted to get away from expectations, away from England, away from even the British Isles, he crossed a border few royals dare to cross. And he did it by going somewhere that almost no one connects to the crown at all, the hills of Transylvania. 6. King Charles's Transylvanian guesthouse. You wouldn't think of a Transylvanian cottage when you think of British royalty. And that's exactly why King Charles bought it. Technically, it's not a mansion. It's barely a house, in the royal sense. But in a hidden valley in Romania's Covasna County, the kind of place where GPS gives up and horse carts outnumber cars, sits a cluster of whitewashed Saxon cottages with wooden beams and lime plaster walls. On paper, it's a guest house. In practice, it's something stranger. Charles first visited the region in the late 1990s and quickly became enchanted by its untouched landscapes, traditional farming, and suspiciously English-looking meadows. He claimed to feel a spiritual connection to the place, citing vague ancestral links to Vlad the Impaler. Whether true or not, it became his narrative. And in 2006, through a local foundation, he bought a property in the village of Zalanpatak. He didn't rebrand it. He didn't fortify it. He restored it, meticulously. No royal flags, no plaques. Just hand-carved furniture, local fabrics, and a few discreet photos of Charles himself, smiling next to shepherds or pretending to be just another guest. It's available to book, technically. But there's no glamour, no butlers, no velvet ropes, just bees, wildflowers, and staff who politely ignore the fact that one of their occasional visitors now wears a crown. Charles doesn't come for photo ops. He comes to disappear, and in that sense the guest house works. It's hidden not just geographically, but culturally. The tabloids don't follow him here. There are no paparazzi lurking behind barns. It's anonymity by obscurity. A royal retreat so unroyal it becomes invisible. But just as Charles has his secret cottage overseas, William and Kate have one of their own. Not in some far-flung village, but deep within the fog and folklore of Balmoral itself. A stone hut with a scandalously ordinary name, a love story written between university semesters and fir trees. 7. Tam-na-ghar Cottage. It's easy to imagine the royal family as a cast of marble busts, stiff, ceremonial, immune to the whims of real life. But tucked away somewhere inside the wilds of Balmoral, just a mile or two from the main castle, lies the kind of place that suggests otherwise. It's not marked on the tour maps. It doesn't show up in the souvenir shop. Most visitors don't even know it exists. Welcome to Tam-na-ghar, the cottage that started as a gift and quietly turned into a myth. The Queen Mother left it to Prince William. A simple stone lodge nestled in the trees, far from the motorcades and tabloids. It's not large. It's not opulent. It's not even publicly acknowledged most of the time. And yet, it's one of the most quietly significant royal hideouts in the UK. Because this is the house where William and Kate played house, long before they ever had one. Back in their university days, this was their retreat. The place where the seriousness of royal destiny collided with the awkwardness of young love. No staff, no press, just a fireplace, some old books, and two people trying to figure out what it meant to be normal when you're anything but. Since then, Tam-na-ghar has hovered just beneath the radar, occasionally whispered about in royal memoirs or tagged by satellite sleuths. It's too modest to draw real attention, which makes it perfect. Even after they married, the couple kept it as a private bolt hole. When Balmoral Castle was swarming with extended family or summer staff, they'd slip away here. No tiaras, no photographs, just a view of the loch and the kind of peace that only comes from being fully, finally, off stage. No public has ever been invited. No journalists have been allowed a tour. The house has only ever been seen in fragments. A window here, a porch there, glimpsed behind a curtain of pine trees and plausible deniability. In the grand theater of royalty, Tam-na-ghar is the unlit corner backstage, where the actors take off their masks and breathe. And while William and Kate were escaping public scrutiny in their stone cottage, another royal, one far less beloved by the press, was enjoying a life of quiet luxury just a few hundred miles away, in a house you're not supposed to talk about anymore. 8. Royal Lodge. For 2 decades, Royal Lodge sat behind the trees of Windsor Great Park, like a secret everyone in the village knew, but no one dared to say out loud. It was built in the 17th century and has served many purposes. A hunting lodge, a royal country home, a place to stash retired courtiers. But since 2003, it's been the residence of Prince Andrew, the Duke of York. Though you're less likely to see that title used these days. What you'll hear instead is disgraced royal, a phrase that now clings to the building like mildew. Still, the lodge itself is something else entirely. 30 rooms, private grounds, ornate interiors. It was once the Queen Mother's retreat. and some say she considered it her real home more than Buckingham Palace ever was. Andrew secured it under a 75-year lease, a deal so unusual, so strangely favorable, that it drew the attention of Parliament. The rent was essentially a one-time lump sum plus renovations. No monthly checks, no accountability. For years, Andrew lived there with his daughters and ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, in a sort of suspended fairy tale, hidden from public view, shaded by scandal. It was never part of the formal royal roster, and it was never open to tourists, but it was vast, opulent, and deeply secure, a kind of aristocratic limbo. Now, with mounting pressure and waning status, Andrew is reportedly being pushed out. But the building remains. It doesn't care who signs the lease. Royal Lodge is a perfect example of a home that has outlasted its occupants, a place where power hides even as it crumbles. And down the Thames, in a quieter part of London, another cousin of the Queen lives in similarly understated luxury, though hers is hidden more by geography than by scandal. 9. Thatched House Lodge. At the edge of Richmond Park, where deer still roam like forgotten ancestors, and the city fades into managed wilderness, sits Thatched House Lodge, a name that sounds humble until you realize it has 6 reception rooms, 6 bedrooms, and gardens that stretch past the horizon of most people's mortgage dreams. This is the home of Princess Alexandra, one of the Queen's cousins. You probably wouldn't recognize her if you passed her on the street, and that's by design. Alexandra has kept a low profile for decades, carrying out just enough royal duties to stay in the loop but never enough to trend on Twitter. Her house follows the same philosophy. Thatched House Lodge was originally built in the 17th century, long before indoor plumbing or democracy, and has since been transformed into a graceful, somewhat anachronistic pocket of privilege. It's technically part of the Crown estate, but Alexandra secured a long lease on it in the 1960s. Later, she and her late husband purchased the sublease, meaning they can, in theory, sell it. With Crown permission, of course. It's not an obvious royal residence. There's no changing of the guard, no palace walls, no coach tours. From the outside, it looks like the kind of place a successful art dealer might own, not a princess. But look closer, and the details appear. The iron gates, the subtle surveillance, the security vehicles parked just out of sight. It is royal, just not the kind that makes headlines. Recent parliamentary inquiries revealed that the rent Alexandra pays is shockingly low. That didn't go down well. But no one's knocking on the door, because Thatched House Lodge, like its resident, has perfected the art of aristocratic invisibility. And farther north, where the land gets rougher and the roads twist toward the sea, there's a castle that once belonged to a queen who loved dogs, drink, and distance from London. 10. Castle of May. It's easy to forget that Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, long before she became a royal relic of tea towels and charity luncheons, was a widow with a taste for solitude. After King George VI died in 1952, she did what many people do when grief becomes too large to carry in public. She bought a fixer-upper, a castle no less, on the far windy edge of mainland Scotland. The Castle of May in Caithness was a stone carcass when she found it, nearly derelict, walls crumbling, windows missing. She bought it anyway, reportedly for a song, and then she restored it, piece by stubborn piece, until it became a functioning fortress once again. But it wasn't meant for grandeur. It was meant for escape. She spent her summers there, Augusts and Octobers, year after year, far from the manicured formality of London. Here, she gardened. She hosted local children. She walked her dogs through the salt-stung wind, and nobody interrupted her. Today, the Castle of May is owned by a trust and open to visitors, most of the time. But every summer the gates close for a few weeks. That's when King Charles and Queen Camilla move in, maintaining the tradition. And while the public never sees much of what happens during those stays, The symbolism is potent. The castle remains a haven, not quite royal, not quite private, somewhere in between. Its isolation is not incidental. It's the entire point. It takes effort to get there, and even more to be noticed once you do. There are no palace guards, no swarms of staff, just thick walls, thick weather, and a lingering sense that this was once a place where a queen came to feel small, in a good way. And hidden just behind Windsor Castle, tucked within its gardens like a leftover footnote, lies another house of quiet detachment, a residence that once belonged to royalty trying to play it normal, until the press found them anyway. 11. Frogmore Cottage. There's a strange poetic irony to the name Frogmore. It sounds like a fairy tale location, but the reality is far more complicated and far more revealing. Built in 1801 on the grounds of Frogmore House, Frogmore Cottage was never meant to be grand. It was called Double Garden Cottage back then, and it served as the sort of royal utility space where distant cousins, assistants, or personal secretaries might stay when the big house was full. Queen Victoria's Indian attendant Abdul Karim once lived there, which tells you everything about its role, quietly adjacent to power but never truly inside it. In 2019, it became something else. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were granted the cottage after their marriage. It was meant to be a retreat, a compromise between privacy and privilege, between royal duty and personal autonomy. Millions were spent on renovations, walls were knocked through, kitchens were updated, and for a while, it worked. The couple lived there quietly, out of sight, away from London, until they didn't. The media frenzy that followed their departure from royal life turned Frogmore Cottage into something else, a symbol of the impossible, a home that wasn't quite theirs, attached to a family they no longer fully served. When they left, the crown reclaimed the keys, but the aura of the place remained. Frogmore is still there, hidden, inaccessible, shaded by tall trees and royal confusion. It's not on the tour map. You won't find signs pointing to it. It exists in the corner of a royal estate and in the margins of a royal saga. And just a short drive through Windsor's wooded corners, past a few deer and plenty of secrets, lies a house once at the center of the most famous abdication in British history. A place built like a fortress, remembered like a scandal. 12. Fort Belvedere. If houses had facial expressions, Fort Belvedere would smirk. Built originally in the 18th century as a decorative folly on the edge of Windsor Great Park, it was never intended for serious royal habitation. But leave it to Edward VIII, the original royal rebel with a taste for modern furniture and constitutional crises, to turn it into a bachelor paradise. And later, an escape hatch. From 1929, Edward, then Prince of Wales, made it his home. He revamped the interiors, added a swimming pool, threw parties that scandalized courtiers, and installed telephones in nearly every room, an act of outrageous modernity for the time. But the real claim to fame came in 1936, when Fort Belvedere became the setting for one of the most consequential events in modern monarchy, the signing of Edward's abdication. You'd think a place that witnessed that level of royal upheaval would be immortalized, turned into a shrine or museum. It wasn't. After Edward left the country, the fort faded quietly into royal background noise. Today, it's leased to private tenants and is firmly off limits to the public. No tours, no peeks, no selfies on the grounds. What's left is a house that knows too much and says nothing. Nestled behind trees, within walking distance of Windsor Castle, yet treated as if it's on another planet. You can barely see it from the air, and even then, it looks like a mirage. History happened here. Not the kind you put in gift shops, but the kind that lingers in silence. The walls remain, the furniture doesn't, and the monarchy, as always, moved on, toward a quieter, more ambiguous era, one in which another manor, nestled deep in the Wiltshire countryside, held secrets of a more personal kind. 13. Bolehyde Manor. You won't find Bolehyde Manor on any official royal list. It doesn't have a royal plaque. There are no guards. No royal flags ever flew here. And yet, this unassuming manor in Wiltshire has long cast a quiet shadow across one of the most controversial royal relationships of the modern era. Before she was Queen Camilla, before she was even Camilla, Duchess of Cornwall, she was Camilla Parker Bowles, and Bolehyde was her home. A 17th century Grade II listed manor near Chippenham, surrounded by fields and whispers. She lived there from 1973 to 1986 with her then-husband, Andrew Parker Bowles. And according to countless biographies, tabloid reports, and whispered memoirs, it was during this time that Prince Charles was a frequent familiar guest. The exact nature of his visits remains the subject of royal lore, speculative, romanticized, and very deliberately undocumented. But whether the rumors were entirely true or just tantalizingly plausible, Bolehyde became the unofficial backdrop of a love story that would eventually rewrite royal history. It wasn't a palace, but it played host to a future queen consort. That counts for something. Today, the manor is privately owned and has passed out of royal hands entirely. But the mythology lingers. You can't walk past it without sensing that something happened there, something more emotionally combustible than constitutional, but just as defining. It's not the kind of place that attracts tourists. It attracts curiosity. And unlike the other homes we visited, castles, estates, hidden cottages, Bolehyde has no royal exit plan, no ceremonial relevance, just a reputation. Which might be the most haunting legacy of all, because if the British monarchy excels at anything, it's this: hiding its true self not just behind walls, but behind real estate, endlessly maintained, meticulously scrubbed, and always just out of reach.